Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, today I want to talk about something that echoes through the ages. The timeless wisdom of ancient Chinese philosophers and the life-changing lessons that many men sadly learn too late in life. He who conquers others is strong. He who conquers himself is mighty. Lao Tzu, these words are not just poetic. They are a mirror for every man who waits until life humbles him before he truly listens. Today, I invite you to open your heart before life forces it open. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Lao Tzu, too often, men wait for the perfect moment, the right opportunity, or someone's permission to chase purpose. But ancient wisdom reminds us, the greatest journey begins when you dare to start. To know your ignorance is the best part of knowledge. Confucius, we live thinking we know it all, until the weight of life teaches us otherwise. But imagine how different life could be if we humbled ourselves before regret did it for us. Silence is a true friend who never betrays. Confucius, in a noisy world full of pride, power, and pressure, many men learn too late that peace doesn't come from conquering the world. It comes from understanding yourself. Brothers, sisters, this isn't just history. These are roadmaps, truths, warnings, and maybe redemption. If you're ready, let's uncover the forgotten lessons of the sages. Before life teaches us the hard way, true strength is mastering yourself, not others. This lesson, echoed by Lao Tzu, cuts through the noise of the modern world where masculinity is too often measured by dominance, control, and external achievements. From a young age, many men are taught to chase power, to win arguments, to control situations, to never appear weak. The world applauds men who conquer others, who climb to the top no matter who they step on along the way. But ancient Chinese wisdom flips this idea completely. It tells us that the strongest man is not the one who defeats others, but the one who defeats himself. His ego, his anger, his fears, and his impulses. The path to mastering oneself is not glamorous. It's quiet, it's internal. It's the choice to respond with patience when provoked, to forgive when you've been hurt, to admit fault when pride tells you to point fingers. It's the strength to remain calm in chaos, to stay disciplined when no one's watching, and to be consistent in your values even when the world pressures you to compromise. These are not easy victories. There's no applause for resisting temptation or controlling your temper. But these battles shape character more than any external win ever could. Consider how many men late in life look back and realize that their greatest regrets stem not from what others did to them, but from their own lack of self-control. Words they can't take back, relationships they didn't nurture, decisions made in anger or ego. These are the true losses. And yet, they all trace back to the same root: the inability to master the self. This is why ancient Chinese philosophers saw self-discipline and self-awareness not as optional virtues, but as foundational strengths. Because without them, every other success becomes fragile. A man who rules nations but can't rule his own heart is always one decision away from collapse. Mastery of self also means learning to live from the inside out, not the outside in. Many men define their worth by the world's metrics: money, titles, status, approval. But inner mastery is about being guided by principle, not popularity. It's having the courage to stand alone if truth demands it. It's being rooted enough in your identity that flattery doesn't inflate you and criticism doesn't crush you. That kind of man is unshakable, not because he controls others, but because he has gained control over himself. This teaching isn't just philosophical, it's intensely practical. Every man will face tests in life, moments of injustice, betrayal, temptation, or failure. These moments reveal whether a man has mastered his emotions or whether he is a slave to them. Anger might feel powerful in the moment, but it often leads to destruction. Desire might promise fulfillment, but it can rob a man of peace if left unchecked. The ancient sages didn't just warn against these emotions. They taught men how to navigate them with wisdom and restraint. To master yourself is to know yourself. This requires brutal honesty. You have to face your insecurities, your fears, your flaws, not with shame, but with responsibility. Confucius said, when we see men of worth, we should think of equaling them. When we see men of a contrary character, we should turn inwards and examine ourselves. This inward examination is rare in a world that teaches men to project strength instead of cultivating it. But without this reflection, growth is impossible. A man who never looks inward lives in cycles, repeating mistakes, blaming others, staying stuck. Discipline is the daily practice of inner mastery. It's waking up early, not because it's easy, but because your goals demand it. It's saying no to the temporary pleasure for the sake of long-term vision. It's holding your tongue when anger wants to speak. Every time a man chooses discipline over comfort, he grows stronger, not just in body, but in mind and spirit. That strength compounds over time, and it's visible not in how loud a man is, but in how calm, how focused, and how resilient he becomes under pressure. Humility is another mark of inner mastery. It takes strength to admit you don't know everything, to ask for help, to learn from someone younger, or to say, I was wrong. Men who lack self-mastery often hide behind arrogance or defensiveness. But a man who has faced himself has nothing to prove. He leads with quiet confidence, not bravado. He listens more than he speaks. He seeks growth over validation. And in doing so, he earns a kind of respect that can't be demanded, only deserved. Forgiveness, too, is a powerful act of inner strength, not because others deserve it, but because bitterness poisons the soul. Ancient philosophers understood that carrying resentment is like holding a burning coal with the intent to throw it at someone. You're the one who gets burned. Releasing that weight requires maturity, emotional intelligence, and a deep understanding that peace within is more valuable than revenge without. The man who forgives is not weak. He is strong enough to choose freedom over fury. Stillness is another practice of the strong. In a world of noise, distractions, and pressure to constantly act, the man who can be still, who can listen, reflect, and act with intention rather than impulse, possesses an uncommon strength. As Lao Tzu said, do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? The answer to that question often separates those who react from those who lead. and the one who leads himself well leads others well. Success without inner peace is still failure. This truth stands in stark contrast to what society often teaches men from a young age. The world promotes a version of success that is loud, visible, and externally validated. A bigger house, a higher salary, a faster car, more recognition, more power. But too many men climb that ladder only to discover it was leaning against the wrong wall. They achieve everything the world told them to chase, yet inside they feel restless, hollow, or even broken. Ancient Chinese philosophy teaches that true success cannot be separated from inner peace. Without that stillness of mind, that sense of balance and contentment, every victory feels strangely empty. Confucius emphasized harmony within the self, within relationships, within society. He believed that peace of mind was not a byproduct of success, but a necessary foundation for it. In the rush to achieve, many men forget to cultivate that foundation. They burn themselves out, break their families, and ignore their mental and spiritual needs, all in the name of progress. But success that costs you your peace is the most expensive kind of failure. It's a trade that looks impressive on the outside, but drains a man from the inside. Many men don't realize this until later in life, when the applause fades and the goals have been met. They begin to ask questions they never had time to think about before. Questions like, why don't I feel fulfilled? Why do I still feel anxious, angry, or disconnected? What was it all for? These questions are not signs of weakness, but signals from the soul, a reminder that true success includes emotional and spiritual well-being. The ancient sages understood this deeply. They saw that without inner peace, achievements become distractions. They may impress others, but they fail to satisfy the self. Lao Tzu spoke often about balance, the idea of yin and yang, of opposing forces working together in harmony. This principle applies to life itself. External success must be balanced with internal alignment. Action must be balanced with stillness. Ambition must be balanced with contentment. When a man neglects this balance, he becomes lopsided, strong in one area but fragile in another. He may be financially rich but emotionally poor. He may command respect at work but feel like a stranger in his own home. The ancient wisdom teaches us that no man is truly successful if he cannot sleep at night with a quiet heart. Peace does not mean passivity. It's not about doing less or wanting less. It's about being centered no matter what you do. Inner peace is the ability to stay grounded in the midst of chaos, to remain true to your values in the face of pressure, to find joy that isn't dependent on circumstance. It is a strength, not a weakness. It takes more courage to be calm in the storm than to rage against it. And for a man to cultivate this kind of peace, he must first unlearn the lie that success is only about results. He must begin to value how he lives just as much as what he achieves. One of the greatest sources of inner turmoil is the constant comparison to others. Men are often trapped in a cycle of measuring their lives against someone else's highlight reel. His car, his career, his physique, his relationship. This envy creates discontent even in the midst of abundance. The ancient Chinese philosophers warned against this. They taught that the wise man looks inward, not outward. He does not compete with others, but seeks to improve himself. He understands that the only meaningful competition is between who he was yesterday and who he is today. This inward focus creates a quiet confidence, one that does not need to be flaunted because it is rooted in truth. Another key aspect of peace is alignment. When a man's actions match his principles, when you say one thing and do another, when you pretend to be someone you're not, when you sacrifice integrity for gain, it creates a fracture within the soul. That inner dissonance steals peace. It keeps a man up at night and eats away at his confidence. Ancient wisdom calls men to live with honor, to be congruent in thought, word, and deed. When you live in alignment with your values, you may not always win in the eyes of the world, but you win something far more important: peace of mind. Time is another factor. So many men rush through life trying to prove something. But what are they rushing toward? Death comes to all, and no achievement can stop it. The sages remind us to slow down, to savor the moment, to be fully present. Peace is found in the now, not in some distant milestone. A peaceful man does not wait for someday to enjoy life. He finds beauty in today. He builds relationships, nurtures gratitude, and practices mindfulness. These are not luxuries, they are essentials. Lastly, peace often requires healing. Many men carry wounds from childhood, from failure, from betrayal. These wounds, if ignored, create patterns of fear, defensiveness, and anger. The path to peace is not denial, but confrontation and compassion. Ancient teachings encourage self-awareness, forgiveness, and emotional intelligence. They teach that peace comes not from suppressing pain, but from transforming it. When a man learns to heal, he becomes whole. And a whole man, even if he owns little, is richer than a broken man with everything. Pride blinds men until humility forces their eyes open. From the earliest days of life, men are encouraged to be confident, assertive, and sure of themselves, traits often mistaken for strength. But when confidence crosses the line into arrogance and assurance becomes stubborn pride, the very traits that were supposed to elevate a man begin to imprison him. Ancient Chinese philosophers understood this paradox deeply. They warned that pride is a form of blindness, a barrier between a man and truth, a veil that distorts reality and prevents growth. It's not that pride itself is always evil. It's that unchecked pride makes it impossible for a man to see himself clearly, to receive correction, or to admit that he doesn't know everything. Confucius taught that wisdom begins when a man recognizes what he does not know. But pride tells a man he already knows enough. It tells him to defend his ego instead of examining it. It whispers that asking for help is weakness, that admitting wrong is failure, and that change is loss. So he resists growth even when it's exactly what he needs. He deflects criticism, avoids responsibility, and looks outward for blame rather than inward for answers. This is the quiet damage pride causes, not in explosive moments, but in subtle, repeated choices that keep a man stuck. Pride also isolates. A proud man believes he must maintain an image, keep control, and always appear strong. But in doing so, he builds walls between himself and others. he becomes hard to approach, difficult to connect with, and slow to trust. Relationships suffer. Advice is rejected. Opportunities are missed. And yet the man doesn't see it because pride has convinced him that he's right even when he's not. The sages of old taught that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's not weakness. It's strength under control. It's being grounded enough to say, I don't have all the answers. And wise enough to know that's where real learning begins. There comes a time in many men's lives, often through pain, loss, or failure, when the illusion cracks. When the job is gone, the relationship is broken, the health fails, or the respect fades, and the man is left face to face with himself. It's in these moments, when pride can no longer protect him, that humility has a chance to do its work. Humility opens the eyes. It creates space for reflection, for repentance, for redirection. It invites mentors, healing, truth, and transformation. It shows a man what he couldn't see when he was too busy trying to prove himself. In ancient teachings, humility is not something a man falls into. It's something he chooses. It requires courage to admit, I was wrong. It takes wisdom to ask, what can I learn from this? It takes strength to say, I need help. And yet, every time a man embraces humility, he grows, he builds deeper relationships. He becomes more teachable. He becomes more resilient. And paradoxically, he becomes more respected. Not because he demands it, but because he has earned it. The proud man often believes that admitting weakness will make others look down on him. But the truth is, people are drawn to authenticity. They trust someone who is honest about their journey, not someone pretending to be perfect. Lao Tzu taught that the higher a man lifts himself in pride, the harder he falls. But when he lowers himself in humility, he finds solid ground. He becomes rooted, stable, real. He's no longer performing. He's simply living with integrity. Humility also brings clarity. When pride is removed, a man can finally see his blind spots. He can evaluate decisions not based on ego, but on wisdom. He can take feedback without feeling attacked. He can listen without needing to interrupt. This clarity leads to better choices, healthier relationships, and a deeper sense of peace. The proud man fights for control. The humble man flows with understanding. One is rigid and defensive. The other is open and adaptable. And it's adaptability, not arrogance, that helps a man endure life's challenges. The teachings of the ancient philosophers remind us that humility is the soil where every other virtue grows. Without it, there's no room for empathy, gratitude, patience, or forgiveness. But with it, a man becomes capable of true greatness, not just in what he does, but in who he becomes. The journey from pride to humility is often painful because it involves confronting uncomfortable truths. But it's a sacred journey, one that every man must take if he wants to live with wisdom, impact, and peace. Pride is like fog. It clouds the vision, hides the road ahead, and makes every step uncertain. But humility is like a clear sky. It reveals what's real, what matters, and where to go next. The ancient sages didn't warn against pride because they wanted to shame men. They warned against it because they knew its cost. And they lifted up humility, not as weakness to avoid, but as strength to embrace. The pursuit of wisdom begins with admitting ignorance. This principle, emphasized repeatedly by ancient Chinese philosophers like Confucius and Lao Tzu, strikes at the heart of a human tendency that particularly affects many men, the fear of appearing weak or unknowing. From early on, men are often conditioned to have all the answers, to be decisive, to act with certainty. But true wisdom, the kind that transforms lives and builds legacy, doesn't come from pretending to know. It begins with the courage to say, I don't know. In that moment, the door to growth swings open, because a man who acknowledges his ignorance becomes teachable, and a teachable man is unstoppable. Confucius famously said, real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. This is not a call to insecurity, but to humility. The man who knows he doesn't know everything begins to ask questions, to listen with an open mind, to seek answers beyond his own understanding. He becomes a student of life, of people, of principles. This mindset is rare in a world that rewards certainty and punishes doubt. But in ancient thought, the wisest were always the most inquisitive. They knew that knowledge is not a destination, but a lifelong journey. And that pride is the roadblock that often stops men from moving forward on that journey. When a man refuses to admit what he doesn't know, he closes himself off from wisdom. He pretends, postures, and guesses, often making poor decisions that could have been avoided with a single question. He may resist correction, reject counsel, and silence his curiosity out of fear of appearing incompetent. But this fear is a thief. It steals insight, progress, and opportunity. The sages understood that wisdom is not owned. It is borrowed from those who came before, shared by those around us, and earned through experience, reflection, and humility. Every man reaches a point in life where his assumptions are challenged, where life throws him into unfamiliar territory, whether it's in relationships, career, parenting, health, or faith. In those moments, pretending to know what to do can cause more harm than good. But acknowledging ignorance is not an admission of failure. It's the first act of wisdom. It's how a man invites guidance, explores truth, and avoids needless mistakes. The ancient philosophers didn't worship knowledge for its own sake. They valued it because of what it produced. Better choices, deeper relationships, a life of virtue and meaning. There is immense freedom in saying, I don't know, but I want to learn. It removes the pressure to be perfect and replaces it with the permission to grow. A man who lives in that space becomes a magnet for insight. He attracts mentors, reads with hunger, listens with intention, and reflects with honesty. He becomes wise not because he started with more answers, but because he started with more questions. In contrast, the man who thinks he already knows all he needs to know stops evolving. He stagnates. He repeats mistakes. He becomes trapped in the small circle of his own limited understanding. The pursuit of wisdom is a discipline, and like any discipline, it requires consistency. It requires a daily willingness to challenge beliefs, to unlearn what no longer serves, to explore opposing views, and to recognize that wisdom is often found in silence more than in speech. Lao Tzu taught that the wise man does not display his wisdom, he lives it. He lets truth shape his actions, not just decorate his words. And often, the wisest men are not the loudest in the room, but the most attentive, absorbing, observing, learning. Admitting ignorance also builds deeper connections. When a man is willing to say, "Teach me," he honors the person in front of him. He values their experience, their insight, and their story. This posture fosters mutual respect and trust. It disarms conflict and invites collaboration. In contrast, arrogance creates division. It shuts down conversations and erodes relationships. The sages knew that no man is an island. We are meant to learn from each other, to grow through shared wisdom, and to recognize that every person we meet knows something we don't. There is also a spiritual dimension to admitting ignorance. In Chinese philosophy, the Tao, the way, is something that cannot be fully grasped or defined. The more you try to claim mastery over it, the more it escapes you. But when you approach it with reverence, with openness, with the humility to listen rather than label, you begin to align your life with something deeper than intellect. This is not about abandoning reason, it's about transcending ego. The man who knows he does not know opens himself to divine wisdom, to intuitive insight, to truths that go beyond the mind. In practical life, this mindset changes everything. A man who admits ignorance becomes a better leader because he seeks input before making decisions. He becomes a better partner because he listens rather than assumes. He becomes a better father because he learns from his children even as he teaches them. He becomes a better friend because he values perspective over pride. Every area of life improves when a man embraces the truth that wisdom doesn't begin with answers. It begins with questions. Waiting for the perfect moment often means missing it. Life is full of opportunities that present themselves not in ideal packages, but in imperfect, messy, uncertain circumstances. Many men spend years waiting for the right time to start a dream, to mend a relationship, to grow spiritually, to take a risk. But in waiting for perfection, they often miss what was already possible. Ancient Chinese philosophers understood that time is fluid, that the present moment is the only true possession a man has, and that waiting can become a trap disguised as wisdom. While patience has its place, paralysis born from fear, overthinking, or pride leads to regret. Confucius taught that a man who moves, even slowly, is still progressing, while a man who waits indefinitely for everything to align remains stuck. Inaction wrapped in good intentions is still inaction. The idea that there will be a perfect season when all doubts are gone, all conditions are favorable, and all answers are clear is an illusion. Life does not pause until we are ready. It keeps moving, and with every moment we delay, we risk losing what could have been. The perfect time rarely announces itself. Often, it must be created through courage, faith, and willingness to begin despite uncertainty. Lao Tzu wrote, "A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. That step may feel small, awkward, or even uncertain, but it holds power. It is the move that separates dreamers from doers, planners from builders, and the wise from the wishful." Many men stand at the edge of possibility, convinced they need more money, more knowledge, more confidence, or more support before they can start. But more often than not, what they truly need is the bravery to act with what they have. The ancient teachings emphasize flow, moving with life rather than resisting it, stepping into the stream even when you're unsure of where it leads. There is a deep cost to waiting. Ideas die in silence, relationships fade through neglect, potential remains buried, and one day a man wakes up not with a shortage of dreams, but with a heart full of regret. The sages warned against clinging to the illusion of control. They knew that men who try to orchestrate the perfect setup often miss the beauty of spontaneity, the strength born in the struggle, and the clarity that only comes after the leap. Perfectionism, though often mistaken for excellence, is frequently rooted in fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of not being enough. The truth is, the most defining moments in a man's life often happen in imperfection. The bold conversation that starts healing, the creative idea acted on before it felt fully formed, the decision to walk by faith, not by sight. Waiting for perfection robs a man of these moments. It convinces him to rehearse his life instead of living it. It causes him to study the battlefield endlessly, but never enter the fight. And while he waits, life moves on. Other people grow. Opportunities shift. Windows close. What could have been a chapter becomes a sentence or a footnote. Ancient wisdom does not encourage recklessness, but it champions decisiveness. The man who observes, reflects, and then acts, even with uncertainty, is wiser than the man who endlessly prepares but never moves. There is a balance to be found, a harmony between thought and action, between planning and execution. The wise man uses the time he has, not the time he wishes for. He learns to trust his intuition, to take responsibility for his progress, and to find peace in doing what he can with what he knows. He understands that every action is imperfect, but every action teaches. Time is not just a resource, it is a teacher, and often it teaches through movement. The steps we take, even when they feel clumsy, reveal things we could never see while standing still. Motion brings clarity. It brings correction. It brings unexpected allies, challenges, and lessons. But none of that comes to the man who waits for all signs to point forward. Ancient philosophy encourages stepping into the unknown with humility, faith, and openness. Not every step will succeed, but every step will shape. That shaping process is what makes a man wiser, stronger, and more aligned with his purpose. Even nature reflects this truth. Seasons don't wait to be perfect before changing. Rivers don't wait for certainty before flowing. Trees don't hesitate to grow because of tomorrow's forecast. Life moves. The man who learns to move with it gains momentum, wisdom, and the joy of progress. He stops trying to master every outcome and begins to master the art of movement. Lao Tzu emphasized that yielding often surpasses force, that starting brings more growth than waiting. The man who begins, even trembling, has already done more than the one who stands still with confidence. Some of the greatest accomplishments in history began in uncertainty. Many spiritual awakenings happened not because a man was ready, but because he responded. Many life transformations started not with clarity, but with desperation and a decision. The sages remind us that readiness is often a myth. What matters is response. And response cannot wait for perfection. It must arise from conviction, from courage, and from the refusal to let fear dress itself up as logic. Happiness is found in simplicity, not in excess. Ancient Chinese philosophers, particularly Lao Tzu and Confucius, taught that the pursuit of more wealth, more possessions, more achievements often leads a man away from peace, not toward it. In today's fast-paced and material-driven world, men are constantly pushed to accumulate. They are told that their worth is defined by the size of their bank account, the car they drive, the house they own, the watch on their wrist. But once these things are acquired, many men discover an uncomfortable truth. They still feel empty. The external noise has increased, but the internal fulfillment remains absent. The wisdom of the ancients calls men back to the beauty of simplicity, where contentment replaces craving and stillness replaces striving. Simplicity is not about poverty or laziness. It is about clarity and intention. It is the art of focusing on what truly matters and letting go of what doesn't. The man who lives simply does not live without ambition, but his ambition is directed toward things that feed the soul, not just the ego. He invests in meaningful relationships, values time over possessions, and measures success by inner peace rather than outer applause. This mindset shifts the pursuit from accumulation to alignment, aligning one's life with values, purpose, and truth. Lao Tzu said, "He who knows he has enough is rich." This statement cuts against the grain of modern thinking. Society teaches men to always want more, to never be satisfied, to keep chasing the next upgrade. But the endless chase creates anxiety, restlessness, and disconnection. The man who never feels he has enough is always in lack, no matter how much he owns. Simplicity teaches him to appreciate what he has, to be present in the moment, and to enjoy life without needing to constantly consume it. This does not mean a man should not work hard or pursue excellence. It means he should know why he's working and whether the cost of more is worth what he might lose in the process. Excess often leads to distraction. The more a man acquires, the more time, energy, and attention is required to maintain it. The pursuit of excess can become a prison. He may gain wealth but lose time. He may gain recognition but lose sleep. He may gain followers but lose authenticity. The ancient philosophers warned that what appears to be gain can often become a burden. A man must ask himself not just what he wants, but what it will cost him. Simplicity frees him from this trap. It gives him permission to let go of the unnecessary, to declutter not just his environment, but his mind and soul. Simplicity also cultivates gratitude. When a man is not constantly comparing himself to others, he can see the blessings already in front of him. He appreciates small moments. A quiet walk, a deep conversation, a shared meal. He does not need grand experiences to feel alive. He finds joy in the ordinary. This mindset builds resilience because it is not easily shaken by loss or disappointment. His happiness is not built on fragile things. It is rooted in perspective. The man who embraces simplicity becomes rich in awareness, rich in appreciation, and rich in presence. Another gift of simplicity is clarity. When life is not filled with endless noise, a man can hear himself think. He can reflect, meditate, and make decisions from a place of peace. Many men live in a state of constant distraction, always busy, always connected, but rarely present. They don't know what they truly want because they've never had the space to ask the question. Simplicity gives space. It allows a man to reconnect with his inner voice, to examine his motives, and to pursue a life that aligns with his values. The ancient sages believed that clarity is the beginning of wisdom, and simplicity is the soil where clarity grows. In relationships, simplicity removes the pressure to impress and replaces it with the freedom to connect. A man no longer needs to prove his worth through status or possessions. He can show up as himself, vulnerable and honest. He values depth over surface, listening over performing. This makes him a better friend, partner, father, and leader. He brings presence instead of pretense, and people feel safe around him because he is no longer driven by image but by truth. Simplicity also fosters peace. A man who lives simply is less reactive. He is not ruled by the fear of losing what he has because he is not defined by what he owns. He doesn't need to control everything because his happiness isn't tied to circumstance. He can let go. He can adapt. He can rest. Peace is not the absence of challenge, but the presence of balance. Ancient Chinese wisdom teaches that balance comes not from managing more, but from needing less. Spiritual growth also thrives in simplicity. When a man is not distracted by the pursuit of the world, he can turn his heart toward the eternal. He can pray, reflect, and seek meaning without interruption. Simplicity creates margin for the soul. It opens the door to deeper connection with God, with others, and with self. The man who embraces simplicity becomes sensitive to the sacred. He finds that the most powerful truths are often the most quiet, the most transformative moments often the most still.